Hello everyone. Okay, so today's video is going to be about Christmas. Actually, it's going to be about the sun god myth and a lot of the, I guess, where the story actually comes from. Um, and believe it or not, it's not what you're going to expect. The first thing that I want to make sure that I let you know is that I will not be referring to Sun S-U-N versus Sun S-O-N because that's really silly. Um, Essentially, the sun god myths throughout history, throughout all of the different societies and that type of thing, they're they're all different, but they're related in astrology and astronomy and that type of thing. So let's just get into it, shall we? So the first thing is that we need to just put this all into perspective. This is all about paganism. Even the Jews and our religion um, that comes from Abraham, Moses, uh, all of that. It's all pagan. It's pagan tradition. It's stories based on what is happening in the sky, on the earth, all of that to explain what is happening in the sky, on the earth. It's an anthropomorphing of the the goings on in the sky. Um, it's essentially telling stories about the movements of the sun and the planets and the stars and all of this, and how the revolution of the earth and the orbit of the earth around the sun, um, what what happens. It's a way to explain what is going on in nature. That is essentially what paganism is and has always been and will always be. It's about looking at nature and realizing that nature is a thing, I guess. Um, so so I'm going to begin this, uh, I guess, at Christmas time, seeing as how, well, it's December, so let's talk about Christmas and the birth of the sun god. Most of the sun god myths all begin in the same way, um, and most of the sun god myths all end in the same way. And when you look at it astrologically speaking, and you look at it with a fresh eye and understanding that all of the similarities throughout history all point to the same events that happen. Um, so let's begin with the very beginning, with the birth and the nativity, the three magi. Granted, before anyone says anything, I understand that in the Gospels there is no mention of a number. I understand that there is no title other than magi. It's not kings. It's not. They're not specific. I get that. Tradition shows three magi, and it's honestly a matter of the storyteller's interpretation. Um, it all means the same thing, and because of our traditions, we do go with the number three. We go with kings or magi. I mean, we even sing "We three kings of Orientar." We don't say "We three magi of Orientar." Um, and the reason why it's Orient is because they come from the east, and so they're following a star. They're following the star, the brightest star in the sky. It's that's what um, the song is all about. That's what the story is all about. They're following the the star to the birth. Um, so let's go to the birth itself. Um, the the child is reborn or is born and uh, is now on earth to grow and to become an adult. So um, let's move it right to the astrology part, okay? So the three kings, the belt of Orion, are they are referred to, they have been referred to for eons as the three kings. And on December 24th, on the evening of December 24th, when they appear, they are directly in line with Sirius, the brightest star, the eastern star in the sky. And at dawn, it points directly to the sun, which is rising at its lowest point. And then, well, actually, it's set at its lowest point there in the south, and then it moves 1 degree north. Um, and so now there are a lot of people who say who I've been studying this for a while now, and I've heard a lot of um, comments on the negative part, refuting this particular point, because many say that the sun stands still for between the 22nd and the 25th when it moves north 1 degree. And I'm inclined to agree with the naysayers who say, well, no, it doesn't sit still. The earth doesn't the earth doesn't stay in that one spot so that it doesn't move. But it seemed like it to the ancients that it didn't move much, and probably because it's where we're heading as we go around the sun at that point. It's slowing down. It's not moving the at a certain degree because of the angle in which we're moving. And then suddenly on the 25th is when it moves that 1 degree north. So we are around at that point where it is noticeably different. It's no longer losing ground to the south, but now it's gaining ground toward the north. And that's what that's about. And I don't believe for an instant that the sun stays still for 3 days. It seems that it's imperceptible to the ancients anyway. So, and that goes to my later point when I start talking about what happens later. So the three kings are following the star to the birth of the sun. And so that's that story. And of course, in every sun god myth, that's what happens. Three kings follow the star to the birth of the king, birth of the god, birth of the sun, and in in that respect, yes, SON, birth of the sun, um, and it happens in every story. Now, understand too that I don't believe that we need to say that everything is the same. What I'm saying is that there is a reason why there are these certain aspects to every story. They might change a little bit with every story, but that's what happens. We have different versions of even the King Arthur um, uh, legends. They're all different, but the the archetype is the same. When we talk about any hero, the archetype is the same. It's a reluctant hero that's mentored by an older person, who battles an arch nemesis, and loses, and then gets trained up a little bit more. It's always the same sort of um, formula, right? So we have this same formula for each of the sun gods that that are throughout antiquity. So we have we have that part. It's astrological. The birth of Jesus is like any of the other sun gods, astrological. The three the three kings of Orion's belt um, follow Sirius, the star in the east that points directly down to the sun that is rising now 1 degree north of where it last set. Um, so so that is the astrological um, reasoning behind the uh, birth, and all of this happens with Virgo being in the sky at the same time. It happens in the house of Virgo, and Virgo is the Virgin, and she's also typically represented with a sheaf of wheat, um, and she's also called, or the constellation is also called the House of Bread, which, by the way, Bethlehem is House of Bread. It's Hebrew for house of bread. So um, we have this child born in the house of bread, um, by the Virgin, um, and followed, adored by three kings who followed the eastern star to its birth. So that's that. And the death also happens at the time of Yule / Christmas. And now I've heard and read the refutation of this particular thing that I'm about to say, but I also have a refutation of the refutation. So the sun on the 22nd on Yule set in the Southern Cross. Now, we don't see the Southern Cross because it's too far south. However, up until 400 AD, people as far north as Britain saw the Southern Cross in the southern sky. As the sun on the 22nd sets, it sets on the cross, and sets in the time of the cross, and it stays very low in the sky, in that southern end, moving almost imperceptibly, particularly to the ancients, for 3 days before it is risen. Do I need to go any further with that? The analogy is very real and very obvious. And of course, that also happens in every um, sun god myth. Um, the the death of the sun god happens, um, and they are in the tomb or dead for 3 days, and then they rise on the third, and they are essentially slain on a cross or something to that effect. Um, so um, the Southern Cross moved, or well, we moved. The Earth moved a little bit with the shift as it's moving through the houses, or as the sun is moving through the houses, and we're going along with it. So the Southern Cross is much further south now than it was up until about 400 AD when they saw it. And when you consider that many of these, well, Matthew wasn't even written until around 150 AD, and the sun god myths, particularly um, monotheistic type savior stories that Jesus is very much like, they were very prominent in the Middle East at that point, around from 100 BC clear up until about 200 AD. So for 300 years there were these tales of this sun god that are very much the same as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Different names, different details, that type of thing, but always the same formula. So understand that that's essentially nothing but paganism. It is them explaining what is going on, or anthropomorphizing what was going on with the sky, and teaching it through that, and creating a lesson for the younger kids, so to speak, or just deciding that, oh, this is a fun literary thing to do, so let's do it. Everyone else is doing it, we may as well. So we have all of that, that part of the astronomy, part of what's going on in the sky with the constellations and the sun and all of that. And please note that I do not believe for an instant that the sun stays still from the 22nd to the 25th. I don't really know that much about astronomy, but I'm assuming that based on what we knew in antiquity, that they probably perceived it staying in one spot for those 3 days, and thus it is dead, thus it stays put. And it's less perceived to move during those 3 days. But then it noticeably shifts toward the north. So if we understand that we're not talking about year 2018, we're talking about 150. We're talking about BC 100. We're talking about very, very early times when they don't necessarily have the scientific knowledge that we have now, that yes, the sun definitely moves during that time, or we move. The sun doesn't stand still. We don't stand still. We are moving. Whether we can tell it or not with the naked eye is one thing, but we know that it does happen, we're not stationary. Okay, so understand that I get that, but I also understand that we're talking about folks. Many of them grew up in villages that required them to go with nature and to understand nature and that type of thing. So we can't look at these writings with 21st century eyes. We have to look at these writings and put ourselves in their place, right? So my next point is very large. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this justice, but I'm going to attempt. I've got pictures, and pictures, I will edit this later and throw the pictures in to kind of help with this. We all know the signs of the zodiac. We know that essentially it starts, well, we started with Aries, and it's Aries, Taurus, Gemini, etc., right? We move, the sun moves backwards through the houses. So it would be Gemini, Taurus, Aries, Pisces, Aquarius, right? So we're moving while the sun essentially, or why we move essentially this way, the sun moves counterclockwise through the wheel of the zodiac, through the houses, and it takes about 2,150 years for it to move through each house. And they call these ages. And in the New Testament, whenever Jesus talks about the end of the age, the end of the world, and essentially that's where he talks about the end of the world. Whenever there's a discussion about the end of the world, it's actually the word aeon, which means age. And so we are currently in the age of Pisces. And Pisces has about 140 years left, give or take. And then we're moving into the age of Aquarius. So, now, here's where it gets fun, at least for me. So Pisces, obviously, is fish, right? So we are in the age of Pisces. What is the symbol for the Christians? What is the symbol for Christ? It's this, the ichthus, the symbol of the fish. His first miracle was essentially feeding the multitude with loaves and fishes. That was one of his first miracles. It wasn't his first, but that was one of his first miracles, feeding loaves and fishes to his disciples. Were all essentially fishermen. There were a few different people in there as well, but they were mostly fishermen. It was about fishing. They were to be fishers of men. So the beginning of the age of Pisces was the birth of Jesus, if you believe that he even existed. But the story is that his birth brought in the kingdom of God, the age of Pisces, all of that. The timing is correct for the age of Pisces. All of this. So it's all about being in this age, and moving away from the age of Aries. He talked a lot about the he talked a lot about the old ways and how, you know, the better way is what he was doing. Live the law, put it into your heart, don't, you know, that type of thing. So it was all about forgetting the age of Aries. Now, the age of Aries is the ram. The reason why the Jews blow the shofar, it's a ram's horn. Moses ushered in the age of Aries, and Moses was the mythical figure to usher in the age of Aries. All of these stories, when you look at it, you're seeing that there is a shift in when the characters move, or when the age changes from one to another. You're seeing this differentiation and the passing on of the old age. So the teachings that are attributed to Jesus are discussing how it's more of a heart thing, whereas with the blow of the ram's horn, you need to, in the age of Aries, you need to do more. You need to follow this. You need to follow that. And then in the age of Pisces, but there's more to it. You know, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, turn the other cheek. Okay. Totally screwed those two up. I conflated two verses. I know that, but you know, he talks about loving your neighbor. He talks about loving God. He doesn't talk about as much following the letter of the law. He says that the letter of the law will be here until the end of the age, till the end of Pisces. It's still going to be here because it's still there, but that there's more to it. While the law is there, it doesn't require any longer being followed as much as it was during the age of Aries. So we have the age of Aries. You know, if you've ever seen Rams, if you have ever met an Aries, you know it's very kind of turbulent, almost pugilistic, almost I guess strong-willed. Do it my way or it's the highway. If you know any Aries, you know exactly what I'm saying when I say that. So, the age of Pisces was more about forgiveness. It was more about love. It was less about doing and more about showing. It was about turning it inward and looking at yourself and realizing that it's a heart thing, not a hand thing. So we're going to go back even further now. When we go into the story of Moses, we see that they have come out of Egypt, correct? And they're out of Egypt. And when Moses goes up to the mountain top to receive the commandments from God, when he comes back down, they have built a golden calf. They've built a statue of a bull. And they're dancing around and they're worshiping the bull. What is represented by the bull? I'll help you with this one. Taurus. Taurus is represented by the bull. And what Moses did was when he broke the commandments, he said, okay, we are no longer in the age of Taurus. Okay, this is Tim Gwain speaking here. Okay, this is Tim Gwain paraphrase of what he was saying. You've come out of the age of Taurus. You've come out of Taurus. We'll just say Egypt. Okay, you're out of Egypt. You're out of the age of Taurus, and now it is time to be to set forward to the age of Aries. And so rather than worship the golden calf, now they're blowing ram's horns. We're moving, we're shifting. The movement of the sun through the houses has moved from Taurus to Aries. And that was the shift. So now I have something that I'm assuming, and I'm probably going to look into this myself just a little bit more to kind of figure out if maybe my hypothesis is right. But my hypothesis is this, that before the age of Taurus, obviously we were in the age of Gemini. And I believe that Genesis is a discussion of the age of Gemini, moving toward Moses and the age of Taurus. Sorry, moving from Gemini into Taurus. And so Gemini, I believe that Genesis is really all about that. And so the story of Genesis goes that Adam and Eve were created, and from the sound of it, we're not going to go into the discussion of Lilith and all of that, because it might be all part and parcel of this. I am unsure, but I want to kind of just focus it on, rather than mystical tradition and that type of thing, I'm going to focus it toward the fundamentalist Christian viewpoint, because Lilith might have a lot to do with the Gemini aspect as well. I don't know. Like I said, I want to kind of look into it to kind of test my hypothesis on this. However, so technically, according to Genesis, on the same day, God created man and woman, so they are technically twins. So what is Gemini? Gemini is the twins. Okay, you're going to say usually they're same gender, whatever, but you know, twins can be fraternal as well and be male and female. And so Adam and Eve are twins, and when you start to think about Adam giving up a rib in order to create Eve, yeah, they pretty much have the same DNA, so they are twins. So we've got the first set of twins that are ushering in the age of Gemini. Then we have, we don't necessarily know, neither do we know that it isn't true that Cain and Abel could very well have been twins as well. I've heard some tradition stories like that. Most people believe that they were, you know, that Abel was the older brother, Cain was the little boy, was the little brother. So for my hypothesis, they would be twins, but again, we don't really know whether or not. So they are the second set of twins, and there is the first murder that happens. Um, Cain and Abel both give their sacrifices. Um, God accepts Abel's sacrifice over Cain's, and Cain gets jealous and he kills his brother. And God comes up and says, "Where's your brother?" And he says, "Am I my brother's keeper? I don't know." And that's when God chases him away into the land of Nod and gives him the sign, whatever that is. I won't speculate on what that sign is. It's certainly, as far as I know, it was just a sign. It wasn't a darkened skin color. He wasn't cursed with a dark skin, which I think is absolutely a hateful thing to say anyway. And who knows? He could have actually been cursed with a light skin. So we can go that way as well. So but we don't know what the sign is anyway. He was kicked out. And further on down the road, we've got Abraham. Well, through that we have Melchizedek, the high priest of Salem, that becomes Jerusalem. We have Abraham who goes to Salem to meet with Melchizedek, and of course before that we have Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And my theory has always been that Melchizedek is actually Shem. That I did math based on how old these people were, and turns out that based on the math with the genealogy that is written in that part of Genesis, that Melchizedek is around the same age as Shem would have been if Shem actually lived. So I've always thought that maybe Shem and Melchizedek are the same people. So anyway, he goes to Salem, and he is married to Sarah. They have Isaac, and God tests Abraham's faith and has him take Isaac to a mountain and to slay him. And this is honestly where I believe it's heading toward the end of the age of Gemini and moving toward the age of Aries, because or not Aries but Taurus, because Taurus, because he is then offered the sheep to the ram to kill, which foreshadows also the age of Aries. So then Isaac has Jacob and Esau. Jacob and Esau, they struggled continually. The twins struggled. You see the end of the age of Gemini with that struggle, and So Esau is born first. Well, actually, his arm comes out. They tie a ribbon around his arm. He gets pulled out of the way, and firstborn is Jacob. Um, Jacob later is sitting again, um, like like Cain and Abel. Um, they're talking. Um, Esau is so hungry from working in the fields or whatever that he asks Jacob for some venison for a stew, and he says, "I'll even give you my birthright." Um, and so through usurpation and of course help from Rebecca, um, Jacob winds up um, getting the birthright, getting the father's blessing through deception. At that point, Isaac is so old and blind that he can't really tell the difference. She made a fur covering for his hands and his body so that he felt like Esau, because Esau was hairy, Jacob wasn't. Um, and they separate, the twins separate, and then later on in their life, when both of them have amassed um, family and wealth and all of that, they meet again, um, dressed for war, but wind up um, hugging, reuniting, and becoming brothers again. And then that leads us to the story of Joseph and the movement of the tribes of Israel down into Egypt. And then, of course, exiting from Egypt. Um, so they went from the time of the twins into the time of the bull, and now into toward the time of the ram. So Gemini, Taurus, Aries, and then at the time of Jesus is um, is the beginning of the age of Pisces. Um, so that is pretty much my whole view of the sun god thing, of the myth of Jesus. I really we I didn't really touch on the fact that I have read and have seen um, a couple of people. I don't know um, how peer-reviewed this view is. It makes sense to me, but there is a view that um, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were all based on, they were all just basically stories. They were never meant to be what it is today. They were simply meant to add to the plethora of sun god stories that are out there to explain. They were never meant to be serious. They were literary allegories that defined or anthropomorphized Yule, essentially. So uh, when we take all of these myths, it would be like taking Johnny Appleseed and creating a whole story around Johnny Appleseed and making him a god or a national savior that needs to be worshipped. It's essentially the same thing. Constantine, however, in or around 365 AD, he saw the wisdom in possibly making Rome the very center of this sun god myth that is based on um, the popular sun god stories of the Middle East and even Eastern Europe of the time, of the Celtic lands. How else was he going to be able to control the Celts and the Germanic people who also believed in very much the same type of, um, I'm not going to say believed, they told the same type of stories. by by making this an actual thing, by putting an actual name and creating a whole entire um, reality to it, he was able to then control the peoples of the Roman Empire, by then forcing this new religion that supposedly started in Jerusalem and Judea and moved forward, and now it's moved to what we see today. People basing their lives on a pagan myth. And no, I have absolutely no qualms about saying that Jesus, even God, even Elohim, even the traditions of Judaism are based on paganism. They're all based on looking at the world through an ancient's eyes. So Genesis to Revelation is nothing but allegory. It's nothing but anthropomorphizing what is going on in the heavens. So that's it. I guess if you have any questions, go ahead and leave comments, and if you liked this video, leave the comments. I do have a channel, and so subscribe to my channel. Let's see what happens. I don't know. I'm kind of interested in seeing if maybe my stuff is worth watching. You know, hoping that the video quality will be a little bit better in the future. I'm looking into that right now. Sorry this is so grainy. I just happened to look at the video. Sorry it's so grainy, but it's what I got right now. So I might even just start it out this way and edit into something else. I don't know yet. So anyway, this is my Christmas video. Well, okay, one of them. So you all have a great day. Merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. And so it's